Hey, welcome to the Dark Hours Paranormal Podcast. Happy Thursday. I am your host, Chris Carr.
And I am Kristen Johnson.
Cheers.
Okay.
Cheers, comrades.
Always sporting this Diet Coke.
As you can see up in that corner, we have the Ukraine flag, and we support our Ukraine fellowship out there. I'm sure you all been watching the news with Russia invading them. And trying to cover it up.
Oh yes.
So we noticed something funny because of that. There was something we had wanted to show you guys for a while. It's a Russian base that's in the Arctic Sea, not far. That's my cat scratching on the door. Hopefully that's not coming through the air.
I hope not.
He's such a pain. He just wants to be on TV and stuff.
Mr. Bigglesworth
Wants to be on the radio. Mr. Bigglesworth. Anyways, it's this Russian base, and it's not far from North America, and we had the coordinates for it, and it's kind of hidden, and it's an Arctic area, and kind of cool, except we went to go look at it again and found that it is completely covered in snow, but it's not really. It's Google Maps, and they're hiding it, and this is kind of interesting. So I'm going to see if I can share the slide here, the screen. Let me see. Bear with us. Okay, this is what it looks like now. And you guys can see this, and it is right about here. It's Alexandria Land, but you can also just put Alexandria Land into Google Maps, and that'll bring you here. And it's just outside of it. It's somewhere around this area. And there's an airfield there. It was built during the Cold War. It's thought that they wanted this to have proximity to North America and give you an idea where that actually is. Yeah, it's pretty far up there, but it's right there, and it's all covered in snow now. No chance of seeing it. However, it did look a little different. Does it change the tabs when I change the tabs?
It is.
Okay. Let me see if I can do this right. All right, this is what it looked like before, and it looked kind of science fiction like.
The reason why I really liked this was because it reminded me of the Tic Tac.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially on Google Maps.
It
looked that way.
Went down and researched this a lot.
These things here look like Tic Tacs connected to some kind of base, but as you can see, this is an aerial photograph. These are windows. But from directly above in Google Maps, that looked very much like Tic Tacs landing on a space base.
Yes, it did. I was like,
and thought that was interesting and kind of cool. But there it is now. Can't see it at all.
Yeah, so that's interesting because what you said, Google Maps is owned by, of course, Google.
Google, yeah. I don't know why they would particularly want to cover it, but there it is. It's covered. I don't know if that has anything to do with the nuclear threat.
That's what I was wondering, if they did it right after the nuclear threat from Russia. So,
though not paranormal, it's pretty darn interesting. The other thing we wanted to bring up real quick was if you watched our prediction show, which was the night before New Year's, the 30th, for 2022, December 30th, right before New Year's, we did a prediction show with Deborah Lynn Katz and Michelle Freed. And we were doing predictions with our audience. And some of those predictions have kind of come to fruition. I think I mentioned in the last show about the Russian skater. We were talking about the Olympics in particular, and I said there would be controversy about a Russian skater. And that came to be as there was a particular Russian skater that tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. And there was a big controversy about that. And she had won the gold. They weren't going to have a ceremony for her. They were going to kick her out and all that stuff. And that actually came to fruition. And the other thing I was harping about, one of the other things, in this time of year, being winter of 2021, 2022, meaning January, February, March into April, was that there would be some kind of tanker sinking. And a story caught my attention this week about a tanker, freighter, really, not really a tanker per se, but a freighter that was heading from Portugal to the U.S., to Rhode Island.
To Rhode Island.
Where we are right now. And it was full of luxury cars. And this came into my YouTube algorithm earlier in the week. And it just said that it had caught fire. I guess some of the electric cars, the batteries had caught fire somehow. One of them exploded. And the ship was on fire, and they evacuated the crew safely, and they were going to tow it. They didn't expect it to sink. And I guess when they went to tow it, it ended up sinking, which was exactly kind of what I was saying in there. And there's a story about that. Is that still the screen? All right, yeah. Let me show you that real quick. This boat here was full of luxury cars, Bentleys, Rolls Royces, Porsches, Audis, $400 million worth of cars. And it sank. So if you're waiting for your Bentley in Rhode Island, you are shit out of luck.
Yeah, SOL, as Mom said.
You're going to be waiting a little bit longer. Porsche says they're working on, rebuilding the cars to replace them. And everybody did get off safely. But just interesting. I think it may be related to that prediction. I'm not sure. We've written down some of those predictions here, and we're going to be following them through the year because we did spring, summer, fall, and winter predictions about different topics such as politics. If you haven't seen that show, you can check it out in our archives wherever you're watching us now. Again, that was with Michelle Freed and Deborah Lynn Katz.
Yeah.
So
we had fun with that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We have a great guest for you.
As always.
As always. Her name is Maria Manalo. She's the author in a genre of fiction and nonfiction, supernatural and historic suspense. Her writing is respected for a skilled use of subtext, riveting scenes, and absorbing details. She's an amateur travel photographer who's traveled the world. She starred as Elisa Simon in episode 2 of the pilot UFOs Over Earth while she was a field investigator. Hello. For MUFON.
Hello.
Hello. She's a screenwriter of many productions, and we'll get into all of that. I'm just going to abbreviate this a little bit, but she has some awesome books. Her first book is called Portal, A Lifetime of Paranormal Experiences, of which I believe she has spun off a podcast for. Her second book, Way Through the Woods, is a nonfiction novel based on a young girl's escape through the haunted Bavarian woods of Nazi Germany. And her third book, which is coming out, is called Haunted Heirlooms. 4 antique dealers reveal their stories, is due for publication on just a month or two. So let's bring her right on. Oh, there we go. I still had the windows up. Hello, Anna.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome to Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast. How are you?
I'm very good. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you.
Yes, we are.
And that is certainly a very interesting bio. You are definitely a busy girl. You got a lot of stuff going on. There was numerous screenplays I noticed in there that you've written and you've been working at. And you've got some great book titles there. What got you into this stuff? Did you have any kind of haunted experiences as a child? Or
actually, I did. Way back, actually, this began where the area where my grandparents had bought a house happened to be in a development in an area that's not really well known today still, but it's about 2.5 hours south of Manila, and it's called San Juan. During World War II, it saw a lot of massacres, a lot of tragedies. And the way it ended was someone had gotten the tract of land and started parceling it out, and it became a development of new homes. My grandparents bought a home with the land, not realizing that there were soldiers, bodies of soldiers, right, buried in the ground. And actually, even today, when you look at the Philippines, which is now very, very heavily populated, there are still vast stretches of land that is used for farmland, and they sometimes come upon bones and things of that nature. So it started with a haunted home, and I actually lived across a neighbor who I chronicled in the first 24 chapters of my first book. This was a family that was infested by all sorts of things, one being demonic energy. So it was one of those things where I was born into it, took for granted what I was seeing between, when you're looking at the side of your eyes or feeling like there's something behind you. Mm-hmm. As my grandmother would say, yeah, there is probably something behind you and it's not necessarily alive. So it began that way. It was one of those things where people would talk about what was happening next door, what was happening across the street. I started taking notice of it when I started elementary school, with just a lot of things that were happening that people would whisper about. It got my curiosity. And then I moved to the States when I was about 13 years old. And the interesting part about it is that my association with some of the old neighbors continued. Some of them also moved to the States, as far as California, but some stayed there. And I kept in touch with them, the ones that actually, were about my age at the time. So that's how I began.
Wow. And it's interesting. Before the show, I was telling you, it's an interesting statistic that almost all our guests, and I mean like greater than 90%, have had some sort of childhood paranormal experiences. And I find that fascinating. As an adult, the interest continues. It's almost like you want to figure out, was that real, what I saw, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Why did it happen? Or, some facet of that experience.
Yeah, it did continue, because I have to tell you guys, it was interesting when you contacted me, because I was in the midst of writing Haunted Heirlooms, which is the book that's coming out late May. And being that your background has to do with antiques, and I was dealing with antique dealers as early as when I was in college, it was opportune. So I wanted to let you know that the interest continued when I started going to college. I was actually very enamored with antiques. I loved collecting things. And at the time, of course, you're on a tight budget. You're just basically a student. All you could do is browse. So, but it didn't really deter me. So I went into kind of like the off the beaten path where I could find them. I would go to thrift shops, wherever, perhaps happenstance on something that was overlooked. And one day I was out with a friend who had a vehicle. Back then you were considered kind of like more, within the inner circle if you had a good vehicle. He happened to have a good vehicle. And we traced off, at the time I lived in Connecticut, went into an open door flea market of sorts, and found a very beautiful Queen Anne chair that was actually in good condition.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's when the paranormal once again started visiting me personally. I kind of like stepped into it by accident. So I
opened the door. Something happened.
I don't know that you want to say open the door. I think unwittingly what happened was the chair came with an attachment.
Ooh.
So my friend took it, put it behind his car. We traipsed back to the dorm, and I plunked it right at the edge of my dorm room. And then I, as I normally do, I spray everything with Lysol, not even realizing maybe I'm destroying the wood or destroying, the chair itself.
Mhm.
I was just trying to disinfect it, and whatever was in there woke up.
Oh boy.
Interesting.
Oh boy.
Oh
So-
boy.
Mhm.
It's not good.
So it went from there, and it didn't deter me. I mean, I still went on to meet a lot of people because of my interest. And that's how I began this book, with my own personal experience with a Queen Anne chair. It was very beautiful.
Wow,
At some point, I had to let go of it, and I ended up becoming involved in a seance because of it.
Oh, let's get into it. But just
Please.
so our audience knows, both Kristen and I had parents that were antique dealers.
Mhm.
And, we grew up around them. And we also had the haunted childhood thing that I mentioned earlier. And, for those of you who don't know, we had these things in our house growing up. And we've wondered. Now, both of our parents that collected those are deceased. We can't ask them a lot about it now. But I always felt like, wow, they must have came across like
Yeah.
some pretty interesting stuff,
The
and
thing is, they didn't really believe. So
Mhm.
your mom,
but
yeah.
I just wasn't as into that stuff when I was younger, and was actually turned off a little bit by antiques. But what's interesting is my daughter is just like you, and she loves going to like thrift shops and antique stores, and is always kind of looking for that overlooked item that might have made it into the thrift shop, and maybe it's haunted, maybe it's not.
Mhm.
She might
Now,
be listening right now. Here's a-
as you know, it varies, Chris. I mean, some people are more open to that, and some are not. It's interesting. Recently, just about, I think this past summer, as a matter of fact, when I was interviewing one of the dealers who's now retired, I walked into an antique shop here locally in Pennsylvania, across the river. I'm near the Delaware River here. Went into New Hope, crossed the river, and went into a shop in the Lambertville area. And I won't mention the shop, as I always change names and don't mention shop names just in case they're still in business. This one is. I approached a beautiful tray. It's fine bone china.
Mhm.
And it had 6 little serving trays with it. It was like a dessert arrangement. Back in the day, people used different trays for different things. This one was made out of fine china, and it came with 6 little dishes with it, kind of like as a set.
Mhm.
So, I looked at it in detail, touched it. I was very reluctant because I was afraid it was going to break something. And it didn't, it had a label underneath. So I went over and asked one of the dealers to help me kind of look under to see if it was dated or who made it or whatever. And she told me it was Nipponware. And I don't know if you know, the last time that Japan produced fine bone china, and it was called Nippon, the last one was in 1921.
Oh.
So this piece of fine china was at least
Heard of Nipponware.
1921. Very beautiful. It had all kinds of intricate, design and filigree on it. But to make a long story short, she said to me, when you approached, it was on a bookcase. When you approached the bookcase, she said, "Did you feel anything?" She actually asked me this.
Yeah.
And the book at the time was already in progress. So I was a little taken aback, because a lot of things tend to happen to me that are kind of in synchronicity, like you contacting me and your parents being antique dealers.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So this one, I had just finished the introduction, which had to do with the Queen Anne chair that I had encountered at the antique shop back in the late 70s. Not to date myself, but that's when I was in college.
Oh, we understand.
Nope.
So I looked at the woman, she was all dressed and well coiffed, ready to greet customers and explain things. You know that.
Mhm.
And I said, what was I supposed to feel? And she said, let me be frank with you. A number of people that have approached this bookcase with all these different things remarked that perhaps we were experiencing a little earthquake.
Oh my.
Oh,
Wow.
And bear in mind, I'm not in California, okay? I am in southeastern Pennsylvania. I
they
said,
literally
okay.
felt shook.
What happened is apparently the entire bookcase shook. And
Wow.
in the case of one person who approached it, the crockery, well, I shouldn't call it crockery. Some of the china fell because there were teacups and saucers in some parts of it. You know, we were talking about a bookcase that probably had about 8 shelvings, of which the Nippon where I was looking at was at the very top. It was within reach, but it was at the very top. So of course I backed away a little bit, thinking to myself, okay, you're overreading this because of the book you're writing. She must mean that the bookcase is flimsy. So I instinctively backed away. I didn't want to disrupt anything. She said, no, honey. She said, it didn't react to you. So it likes you.
Ah.
She's probably like, take it all home. Please.
I thought it was very unusual. I've never had a conversation like that.
That is certainly an odd thing to say, you know, trying to sell a piece. But there's some comments on our audience. Let me just throw a couple of these up here and we'll continue on. Ken Allen of the Wizards Table podcast, which you can find on Facebook. We love Ken. He's a good friend of ours. Says antiques carry a profound amount of energy. Let me see what else we got here. There's a whole bunch of different things. Some of these are just hellos. Oh yeah. Hello, Kristen. Popping in to say hello. Hope your mom liked the book I sent her. And I adjusted the envelope. She did. Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Yes, we do.
Our buddy Steve says there's a lot of energy in these shops. Memories. Heck yeah. Anne Marie says love synchronicity. And Stephen Woodward, owner of the Paralinks Paranormal United Network that we are broadcasting on right now and we'd love, says glory to Ukraine. Heck yeah, Steve.
Heck yeah.
So, yep. I just wanted to cover a few things. We try to incorporate some audience participation and get them going. We'll have questions and things of that nature.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'll be glad to, happy to answer any questions they have.
So that's great. And this book sounds fascinating. And it's an aspect of the paranormal a lot of people don't broach. Antiques, people collect antiques. We talk about haunted objects often on the show, and they're almost always antique in some way, as it would seem, or existed in a different era when it was in its prime. So that's fascinating. I think, matter can hold a consciousness. I really do. We've talked about this in a panpsychism way. Mm-hmm. That objects can hold consciousness, i.e. be haunted, at least, temporarily. I thoroughly believe that. And we've seen some effects of that ourselves. So it would not surprise me that antique dealers would come across quite a few of these haunted objects. And nobody really talks about that. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, the tough part about it, Chris, is that they're hard to kind of get rid of. I mentioned one case in my book, and there's 4 of them that go into detail. And what I do is I narrate, I dramatize, and I try and get the person, so that the audience can get a flavor of the personality of the dealer and what they went through. And one of the situations had to do with the fact that even after they removed the antique from the house, the haunting still remained.
So it liked where it was.
Yeah, it must have.
Yeah. Why do you think these objects become haunted in the first place?
Well, the one common thread that I have noticed in interviewing these people that I have gotten to know a little bit deeper is that it seems like the object in question, either the person who used to own it had a tragic end and was really attached to the material object.
Hmm.
And somehow they didn't want to let go of the life they had or the lifestyle they had. And they continued to follow some of these highly loved, cherished objects.
Possessions. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's almost like they are indeed possessing it. And there's a sense of almost like a selfishness about the whole thing. Because when it's purchased or transferred to someone else, there's almost like an upheaval that happens. There's a rebellion. And when the person died tragically, and you'll see that happened in at least 2 of the stories, they reenact the tragedy, or they bring with them some other creature that ends up manifesting as if to protect the object from being taken or being placed in somewhere else.
That's extremely interesting. I've actually never
Very
heard
much
of
so.
that
Now, did those
before, and
people
I
die like
that.
suddenly, like without any kind of idea that they might die?
Well, in one situation, it was actually a trunk or a chest. The dealer didn't really quite know where it came from. All they know was that it looked to be about either 17th or 18th century, and it came from a Spanish galleon. And somehow it wasn't even the trunk itself that was haunted. It was a room that it was placed in. There was some entity that was right in the room and outside the window that died tragically, that became attached to this chest. So when it was brought in, there was all kinds of activity. People across the street, now this is in Vermont, people across the street had a cafe that ran until about, on certain nights, until 11 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. And they swore there was a party going on inside the antique store.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
When there was no one there. And then there was one particular witness. It was the maintenance man who was on, one of those on-duty calls where they're there because there's an apartment complex above the cafe. And above the cafe, there's all these, they're kind of like a high-end loft apartments that you would find in New York City. They had refurbished them. People lived in them, but there was also a maintenance staff. And the guy looked out and he said, "What is all that glow going on?" And I hear music right behind the building. And all that activity was centered around a particular alley and a particular entity that somehow got attached to an antique chest.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
And these poor dealers just moved there. Okay. And you know what that's like, trying to move your shop.
Yes.
It took them 4 months because it was double the size of the old one.
Right.
They move in there and they almost want to break the lease.
Yeah.
And now had the haunted chest move from one shop to another?
The haunted chest was procured, I think, at some kind of an auction of some type, from what they recall. It came with 2 huge vases, and they put it on either side of it.
Nice.
They were all in perfect condition. And you know how that is. It has like a brass, kind of like a hasp, and then it has like this huge lock. And you have this huge key that they got. The whole thing was complete.
The old chest. Yep.
Is it a
Yes.
skeleton key?
It was probably like paper lined on the inside. And
Well, that's the interesting part. They transported it. And you know how tricky that is to transport without getting it kind of like dinged and everything. So they had to wrap, the vases in particular. They get it there. It's heavy as crazy. It's locked, and they never even thought maybe to open it.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So at some point when all this activity was reaching a crescendo, they said, we got to get to the bottom of this. We got to get a CCTV in here.
Nice.
Because we want to see what's really going on.
Uh-huh.
And the landlord that they were renting from, the guy said, well, wait a minute, what's in this chest? And the guy goes into the, near the register, looks for the key. Lo and behold, the keys that are really elaborate.
Yes.
Looks very old and heavy.
Mm-hmm.
He walks back to what they call the furniture room, which is like where all the large furniture is showcased. Crosses over the threshold into the furniture room. The temperature is like 30 degrees lower.
Come on.
And guess what, Chris?
What happened?
The chest was wide open.
No.
The bolt had been tossed across the room. The hasp was open. The chest was wide open.
So they knew that they were coming to open it.
Whatever it was, knew
the intentions around it.
Great Cost says, holy crap.
Holy crap.
Exactly what I was going to say, but I did not. Thank you.
Wow. And Debbie says, wow. Yeah. Wow. That is something. So was there anything in it, or was it just empty and just open on display?
It had all kinds of wine. It had about maybe 30 bottles of wine from what I was told. And they were, I forget what they're called now. They had a name for the wine, but they were probably over 100 years old, they reckon.
Oh, my.
They were all lying in felt. And then when they took the first bunch out, there was more underneath the felt. And then finally they sold them.
Wow. Yeah, I would have pirated that.
Yeah, well, won it.
Put that in the galley.
Right. And the interesting part about it is that by the time they got to that point where they discovered it had something to do with that Chester trunk, they had already broken a full-length antique mirror. It was one of a kind, in perfect condition.
Wow.
Oh, that's not good.
I mean, it was insured.
Yeah.
But
one of a kind. It's unique.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now it's gone.
It's gone. And they have no idea how it broke.
Yeah.
No idea.
Laurie says the deceased owner didn't want you taken off with their stash.
Yeah. There you go.
That's probably true. And they gave up. They knew it was happening.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I have to imagine antique dealers encounter this stuff kind of often. There's such a circulation of things, things go to auction if they don't sell, and you're handling a lot of stuff. You've got it in your house, your storage. Off it goes, for a temporary time.
Where you are, are you in Providence?
Right.
We're outside of Providence. We're in Rhode Island, and New England, as most people in the U.S. know, is one of the oldest parts of the United States. So we have a lot of antiques up this way, going through places like Pennsylvania. Absolutely. We have some of the older buildings and cemeteries in the United States here.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, one of the stories involves an antique store, which is now gone, in Providence, near the Brown University campus.
Oh yeah, we know right what that is.
Yeah, from what I
so it's fun.
Yeah, and it's interesting because what they did with that one, and I won't give away the entire story here, obviously, but what they did with that one was they tried to get someone to come in who was a sensitive. And it was a very strange thing for them to do. These are people who are very conservative. They really didn't believe in any of this type of stuff. but they ran out of options. They had people who would come in and leave immediately because they got a certain vibe. They were losing business because of what was happening to a particular piece of furniture in a particular room that was stacked to the nines with antiques. They started having to move things around to isolate the piece of furniture, didn't quite know what to do with it. But, there's one there. I don't know if someone else had bought the store or whether it's still an antique store. I don't know.
Fascinating.
Imagine that.
Wow.
Be able to know, like,
Greg says
I didn't
hauntings are
see
part of
that one.
crafters, dealers. Lots of comments out here.
Mhm.
Donna says, I didn't know you were in Rhode Island and the same Providence. I'm in Fall River. Well, hey,
come
Donna.
on. See, there's
Come
my-
on.
Come on.
Yeah, we know Fall River.
There
We
you
know
go.
Fall River.
My
We certainly do.
sons lived there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I grew up in Somerset. Kristen's from Swansea.
Born
So
and
if you're
raised.
local, you'll know what those towns are. They're right next to Fall River. So yeah, that's funny.
They got
Small
that
world. Small world.
that triangle.
Yes, the Bridgewater Triangle.
That's right. We're in the
Yeah.
Bridgewater Triangle.
We are.
Yes, technically. For the most part.
Are you technically included in that?
I think we are.
We're technically
Yeah.
haunted. No, actually, your family's from the Philippines, right? You're from the
Yeah.
Philippines? Now, that's a
Yeah.
very interesting place. There's a place where you get all kinds of supernatural activity. You get things like apports. I think there's an apport museum in the Philippines where things just appear. That's when it can just somebody goes like this and they pull out a chunk of gold or something like that, or it just seems to appear out of the sky. And it's a very interesting supernatural phenomena. In our opinion, a lot of people don't talk about apports.
No, not at all.
There's actually a museum for them there in the Philippines.
They're in the Philippines. So it's the first museum. The second museum is in Canada.
Yeah, it's in Canada.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, no, we love a wide range of supernatural and paranormal activity. So,
Well, the first places I investigated was actually in the Philippines. And speaking of apports, there were tons of apparitions that were making themselves known in a gymnasium. I don't know if you guys are aware of a particular university. It's way off in a rural area, small area where there's a Rice Research Institute. There's a university right next door to it. And apparently the Japanese soldiers during World War II used the gymnasium of the university, amongst other places, to imprison POWs. And in the process also had captured priests, Jesuit priests in this case.
wow.
Wow.
Yeah, and I actually, back in the day, in my salad days, as I would say, when I traveled that far to visit and see people that I knew, they would take me to these haunted places, and that stood out in my mind because in this particular case, every area of the gym had some kind of a haunting. And when I asked a gentleman who was a journalist took me. And when I asked him, why is it this intense that even in daylight, I get a bad vibe? It was kind of like a heaviness, I guess you could say it was almost like if you were swimming in the ocean and you were just barely treading water. That's how heavy it felt when I walked into that gym.
Oof. I hate that
And
feeling.
it was probably around 5 or 6 in the afternoon. And in a tropical country, the sun doesn't set until probably about 9. It's kind of like California. And yet there was a sense of foreboding, a feeling of loneliness. And there was him, and then there was an assistant. There was me. There was 3 of us. There were a couple of students who were walking by inside the gym. And as we got closer to this area that had a stage, I decided I was going to take my camera And I was just going to keep taking some pictures.
And
So take pictures I did.
oh boy.
And you guys, I'm glad you're sitting down. This is before he told me what happened on the stage.
Oh no.
This is a gym that doubles kind of like as a theater.
Mm-hmm.
It was a multi-use area. So it had this stage. It had a wooden floor. When I saw it, it was pretty clean. It was all polished and everything. And he said to me, "Why don't you turn your camera and start taking pictures of the stage?" I said, "I don't really see much on the stage right now, except for curtains that are, divided and pulled up." He said, "Just take them." I think he knew what he was trying to get at. Just keep taking them. And I said, "Okay." So I aimed the camera, took a picture here, took a picture there, took a picture of the curtains. And, I'm very careful about the lens. I keep wiping that, with a cloth, kind of like just what a camera person would do, a photographer, making sure that nothing gets in there, no dust.
Right. Now, I know you're about to tell us what happened, but so people know you spent 27 years traveling the globe as a photographer.
I did.
Right. So you know what you're talking about
doing
with photographs. You're not, just somebody with a camera walking out there. You know how to handle that camera and how to keep that lens clean.
Yeah. So in this particular case, it was a digital camera. When I finally walked towards the exit, and we walked through everything. We went to the racquetball courts. We almost went down to the basement, not that there were chairs thrown down there. I looked at the digital view, and I saw these huge orbs.
Wow.
The size of a dime.
Yeah, we're not talking dust orbs here.
Yeah, all over the stage. And what's interesting is they formed a circle.
Really?
So I turned to the journalist and I said, "Look what I have." And he looked down and he said, "Yes, other people have captured that before." I said, "They're in a circle." He says, "They're not dust." I said, "I know that. They're not dust. What do you think are they?" I said, "What happened on that stage?" So apparently during the war, they captured some Jesuit priests, tied them up, tortured them. And then the Japanese lined them up on stage and had them running in a circle. And as they were running in a circle, they would aim at their head
and
terrible. Decapitate them.
Oh,
God, what an awful story. No wonder why they're still there.
Yeah, that is spooky.
Awful.
So was it a circle that was like people running around, like kind of elliptical looking?
Yeah, I think what was happening was maybe they were reenacting the tragedy.
Maybe.
And that's what I've noticed with these things is that they leave such energy, such negative energy, or maybe some unresolved kind of situation.
It's like a scar.
Yes. Exactly. That's exactly what I thought.
Wow.
Now, are these pictures in your book?
This was not. And I tell you some really weird things here that happened to me on that particular trip.
Okay.
I stayed with a cousin at their house, which was probably about 10 minutes from the campus. And I didn't know that there was also something going on at the house. So one evening, they gave me a room off to myself towards the back of the house. The house had about 5 bedrooms. They gave me the corner that was towards the street along a wall. I promptly fell asleep. I still had, I think at this point, jet lag, so I'm struggling to stay awake all day.
Mhm.
So finally, when I do get to bed, I kind of just flop down, and there we are. We're in La La Land. That was not meant to be. Around midnight, I wake up and there's people yelling and screaming and running outside the window where there's a street.
Ugh.
Okay, I'm now lying in the dark and I hear people yelling, and you could hear feet running down the street just a few yards outside the window and over the wall. The residential houses there are all walled in separately. So there's a cement wall. There's the wall of the house, the window, a cement wall a few yards from that. And then outside that, the street. I heard people running out there. So, of course, I shot up, sat down, wondered what was going on. There was one pale light. It was a street light of some type. They're very pale. That was outside one side because there were two windows forming kind of like a corner. So I got up to look out. Of course, I couldn't see anything because there was a wall, but then there was a grating, some kind of like a wrought iron hujits.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't see anything. So I sat back down again. And the next thing I know, there was a chain that just got thrown over the wall. That's what it sounded to me. And someone was trying to pull the wall down. And people screaming. And then there was marching. I'm not kidding you when I'm telling you this.
No, I don't doubt it.
You.
I don't. The area is considered to be like a paranormal capital.
Right.
Really, I don't know how many of our audience knows that, but that's a very
Well,
haunted area.
Paranormal capital indeed, because I turned around. I finally put my glasses on to be able to see what was going on. I was about to forewarn the lady of the house that we were being broken into because the chain was so loud. I look up. I finally opened the window. I was afraid to open the window, but I had to open the window. It was frosted glass. I opened the window. There were no chains. The sound finally just completely stopped. Completely stopped. The screaming, the marching feet, the chains, the pulling of whatever that wall they were trying to take just completely stopped when I opened the window.
I believe it. It's crazy. That must have seemed really intense. Like you open it up, everything just stops.
Well, I don't think I've ever felt that way before, but I just had chills. And because I couldn't acknowledge what I had heard, I yelled out and I said, "Is anyone out there?" And of course, no one answered me.
No one answered you. It's
Yeah.
just quiet. It's crickets.
Yeah, totally quiet.
Make sure you hit the cricket button.
Oh,
Broken.
I might have hit the wrong one.
I think.
I have a button for crickets.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
Never mind.
maybe
I'm
the
just going to
button,
disregard that right now. But yeah, that's wild.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be brave enough to say something outside. So, but yeah, that's totally crazy. And I wonder what that had to. What is this? What happened there? Was there like somebody trying to break down a wall at one point that you know of, or?
Well, I came to breakfast the next morning. I told them, well, let me back up a little bit. So I finally ran out the door because I just got so creeped out. I just had to walk out of the bedroom. I went to turn on the lights in the hallway. And there's a network of bookcases on the one side of the hallway going towards the family room. And then there were the other bedrooms at the edge of this. As I was passing, all the books came out of the bookcase and fell to the floor.
Oh my goodness.
So
Wow,
by
that's
then I was totally rattled.
Yeah, a little
Uh,
bit.
yeah.
You're beyond chills at this point. What the
My
hell is
cousin
going on?
finally woke up,
Mm.
and another person came out. Another family member. And
Okay.
said, "What did you just see back there?" And one came over, started picking up the books and putting it away. I don't know what knocked that over. I said, "Oh, it always happens when we have a guest in the house who stays overnight."
Okay. Everybody sees the same thing or hears the same thing.
Apparently. I hadn't told them about what happened in the bedroom yet, but they said, "Oh, the books always fly out of the shelves. They fall to the floor." And
Yeah,
one
perfect.
said it must be grandma.
That's amazing.
So it is amazing. The next morning, you got to hear this, you guys. I sit down to breakfast. I decided I'm going to tell them what happened in the room. I told them what happened in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, I get this, "Oh, yeah, you remember that time when such and such stayed overnight? They made a mistake of going into the bedroom across the way, thinking it was a bathroom because they got all creeped out. The bedroom across the way," they said, "don't ever make a mistake of going in there at night." I said, "Really? What's across the way?" "Well, that bedroom is now a storage closet. No one can sleep in there because when they do, they wake up, someone's lying next to them."
Oh boy.
Oh, wow.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's the worst.
That was a good thing to do.
I had something like that happen to me where I woke up and I was convinced there was a presence in my bed and actually holding my hands. And yeah, I was quite,
Just
yeah,
it's-
you know the story.
Yeah,
It's quite scary. It's disturbing. It's like one thing to think about it, but when it actually happens, oh my God.
trying to process what she's saying.
It's probably a good idea to know where that bathroom was, right?
Yeah,
in the
right.
hallway. No question.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was new to me, actually, that it was a zone of, paranormal activity.
I believe Larry says, yeah, agreed.
I'm
No
out.
thanks, Anne Marie says.
Yep, I'm out.
Oh shoot. Says Donna. Yeah, heck, yeah.
Girl, you can swear if you want. Yeah, that's bad.
Now your second book, we'll work our way backwards with the books because we started with the antique dealers.
Okay.
And you have three books out, and I wanted to touch on this one because I think it's a fascinating story. And it's a nonfiction book based on a young girl's escape through haunted Bavaria, the woods of Bavaria from Nazi Germany. And that book is called The Way of the Woods.
Yes.
Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah. So let me tell you how I met this woman, because this is nonfiction. The other two are as well nonfiction paranormal. But this one came to me, once again, synchronicity. I was thinking in my mind of writing a book about one particular case and stretching it into a full volume, the entire book. So I was invited to a birthday party, okay, a big birthday party. It was someone's 50th birthday. And as I sat there, I noticed that the entire restaurant had been closed for the occasion. So apparently everybody had seating cards. I had to go and look for it. It was almost like a wedding. That's how grand it was.
Wow.
Everybody had a seating card. Everybody, kind of like only slightly knew each other, except for a circle of people. I knew 3 people. I knew the birthday celebrant. I knew 2 other people, and that was about it. So their intention was to mix people around. And I ended up sitting next to an elderly lady who at the time was about 89 years old. And she then, made my acquaintance. We were talking, and she says, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm looking to retire, early retirement, yada, yada. I'm thinking about writing another book, yada. Oh, what's it about?" And I said, "I actually don't know." And then she started talking about her life. And that's the result of The Way of the Woods. It was about when she was a little girl and how she survived Nazi Germany as a German girl who was actually recruited at age 12 to become a Nazi youth leader. She was recruited as a teacher, and her parents couldn't do anything about it because they would be taken in by the Nazis.
They were scared. Yeah, right. Sounds a little bit, why I got the flag and Ukraine.
Yeah,
flag.
they were terrified. So this book revolves around what happens to this young girl who was only 14 years old at the time when she chooses to escape through the woods. At this point, her family had been divided up. And it wasn't because she defected, although she had to defect in order to escape. It was because they discovered that her mother was hiding a child who was disabled, a disabled German girl who had Down syndrome.
That's awful.
And that's when the family was torn apart. They call it the T4 program, which basically is this program that the Aryan race, the Germans put together. They called it the Aryan Notebook. And they don't want anyone who's sick or disabled or Jewish or Roma, like a gypsy, or any of the others that were variations from being Aryan. And so they annihilated them. They took them away and they put them in concentration camps.
Wow. No, that's fascinating. It's amazing how they moved in and they tried to make this quote unquote perfect race.
Yeah.
And eliminate the weak and whatnot. And, not to get conspiracy laden or anything like that. But, we talk about that with coronavirus. We ourselves believe it's a biological weapon. We don't know who let it out, but it is it's out there to thin the herds, and wonder about these sort of things.
Yeah.
I think they still exist. And you can look at things like the Georgia Guidestones, for example, with population control and this idea, not just relegated to the Nazis. It's out
now,
there.
What I think is different about this book, Chris and Kristen, is that there have been tons of books written about the Holocaust and people who have escaped and all different kinds of things that have happened as a result of when they were caught. But this one has a supernatural element because what happened is as her family was torn apart and his family was, she was looking for them, she went through the woods and discovered that when people are tragically murdered, they do come back.
They stay earthbound.
Yeah. So it was an eyewitness account. And the question that was put to me by several people was, how can a girl who just turned 14 years old, who entered the woods with basically a rucksack with very little provisions and a little basket that had buns in it, bread, could walk out 150 miles later?
Wow.
She had no water with her. And, when you drink from a stream, you'll get Gordia. Her provisions ran out. The only thing that this woman remembered, she sat there with me, okay? And we went through a course of visits, conversations on the phone. I would come to her house. We would meet up. She said, the only thing I distinctly remember is that when I was in the woods, I was guided. I knew what was edible. I knew what was not edible. I remember eating these little leaves, she said. They were clover. That's all she had.
Wow. So she intrinsically knew, like, this was the right thing to eat. This is the way I should go. Just
Yeah.
knew it within.
Well, I won't give you the spoiler.
Need to read
Well,
that.
now I
You-
want to.
you-
Yeah,
Yeah, we have to read that.
fascinating.
That's all I can give you at this point. But there was a lot of very graphic things. I mean, I obviously would not recommend a child or anyone impressionable reading this. In some parts, there was some real graphic detail about what happens when the earth reenacts the torture, or to kind of like give evidence and give credence that this really happened, these tragedies really happened. This young girl was looking for her father. Her father also saw some of these things, and it was playing to him like a movie on a screen.
Interesting. When you say it's playing to him like a movie on the screen, he was seeing it psychically.
From what her point of view, or he saw his own thing.
He saw his own. I think we would probably call it an apparition. It didn't per se interact with him, but it was so real to him that he felt the blood flying into his face. It was so real to him. This was a man who's a tailor, very much into the here and now, very pragmatic, detail-oriented, analytical, not that kind of person that would be prone to hallucinations.
Right.
He saw it too.
And he saw a lot of things there that he could not explain. When they finally did get together, he told her everything.
Amazing. How long did it take her to get to freedom?
She began on her birthday, which was the beginning of April. She didn't get to cross the border into Austria until about October.
Wow.
There was a lot of hiding.
Yeah.
A lot of some passages that she had to go through.
And she was surviving off the land at this point. She was
what? I'm sorry.
Surviving from the land.
Well, I won't give that away. That is the big question mark.
Yeah.
That is the big question mark as to how.
Right.
And the only thing she had was she was still wearing her uniform as a Nazi youth. The Russians were advancing. She had to change into a regular dress, which is packed in her rucksack. When they were coming around, she was afraid. So she took off all evidence of the uniform and hid it in the rucksack. And then she would put it on again. And then she would walk again. She got to the point where she was wearing dress boots. She wasn't dressed to be hiking. As you know, we have gear when we hike, and we have a tent and all that fancy stuff and the water, but this girl had nothing.
150 miles.
150 miles later. And if you look on Google Earth, and I looked, I was so curious. I mean, when I was talking to this woman, I was transfixed. And part of me was thinking, okay, you have to process what you want to believe, because some of it is just so totally incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman was in full possession of her memories. She had some difficulty with short-term memory, but the full memory, long-term memory, was totally there. She was totally present.
Completely lucid. Yeah.
Completely lucid.
I like that. It's a fascinating story. I want to read that.
Absolutely. We're going to get your books.
That's good. Now, before we go on to your first book, which is fascinating, and I know you have a podcast attached to that.
Yes.
What about being a MUFON investigator?
Mm-hmm.
MUFON being people who investigate UFO phenomena. And I forget the exact acronym. I think it's.
How did you get involved with that?
How did you get involved with that, and what did you
Well,
think?
that's an interesting story in itself. My husband had a friend who invited us over for dinner with his wife. And while we were sitting there having a conversation right after dinner, there was a huge black binder sitting on the coffee table. So curious me flipped through the binder, wondering what it was. I thought at first it was a photo album, to tell you the truth. So I opened it and I looked at it, and it was a manual, a field investigator's manual for the Mutual UFO Network.
Thank you. That was the acronym.
Yeah.
Mutual.
So So I said to the gentleman, "Oh," I said, whose is this?" And he said, "I'm studying and training to be a UFO investigator." I said, "You're kidding me." And I was so piqued that at the end of the evening, I made a note to go on the site. And next thing I knew, I was sitting to take the exam. And then I passed the exam. I studied the entire binder, passed the exam, and just in time for the UFO flap of 2008.
That's really interesting. I
Wow.
didn't know they gave you an exam. That's part of
Yeah.
how you become a MUFON investigator. You have to take a test.
Yeah, I remember how long it was, but I thought it was, it was very informative. The book was very informative, and the exam was a good representation of what we needed to know. So because we were at the beginning of what looked like a UFO flap, I was not really trained on the ground, so to speak. I was immediately sent these assignments by email by the director. At the time, there was only 2 of us in the entire Bucks County area. There was
Wow.
one gentleman, the other one had quit for some reason, and then there was me.
And is this in
So
Pennsylvania?
this is in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm not that familiar with Pennsylvania. I'm from Connecticut. So there were some stretches of Pennsylvania that are very remote, going towards Northampton County.
Yeah.
And there was some really creepy things that were going on there. And I think they're more paranormal, to tell you the truth. But the ones I investigated were definitely not on the planet. So I saw and heard a lot of things. I had my own experiences, which I put in that book. And at the end of it, I ended up on the STAR team, which meant that you had to be online on the MUFON website to take in incoming reports from people and then contact them within the time frame that you had, the 4 hours that you were on call. So I would get the number, I would pick up the phone, and I would contact the person. And a lot of the stories made it on the website. A lot of them, some of them were investigated, some of them were not. And it appeared to me the ones that were being investigated had something to do with some kind of like a anti-gravity type of tone to it. The abductees, the people who were somehow hurt or somehow something happened to them as a result of the experience, they were kind of like put to the side. And I can't tell you to this day why that was. So I put them in my book.
Any of the abductees?
Any of the abductees in the book? Yes.
Yeah. Did you get to interview them?
I got to interview them. There was a case where I got to talk to them a couple of times. I had to change her name for the book. I changed the location, but all the facts basically are there. It went on from there because, I travel a lot and I tell stories when I meet people, tourists and locals alike. And I get more stories from them. And that's how I ended up getting a compilation of all these stories. And then sometime in November, somebody approached us. Actually, in October, somebody approached us. And I think it was someone from the Discovery Channel and wanted to do some kind of a pilot to showcase the most prominent cases. So they put our faces on TV. And then after that, shortly after that, people started approaching me on the street, telling them stories of what happened to them or someone else locally.
Wow, it's awesome though that you got to be on TV.
What kind of a phenomena do you see that is concurrent with paranormal phenomena as we know it in hauntings and that kind of thing? What sort of similarities do you see between the two phenomena?
It's not so much the phenomena as the feeling that accompanies it and where it usually happens. Where it usually happens tends to be where other people might not be. So they're usually remote and they're usually rural, and it's usually later in the evening or early in the morning, kind of like that haunting hour before 5 a.m.
Like the witching hour, they call
Yeah,
it.
right. Like the witching hour. Now that's similar to
Even for
paranormal phenomena and similar to things like Betty and Barney Hill, right?
absolutely, yes.
You know, yeah.
Sure.
So you think the time of day has something to do with it?
The time of day,
or...
the proximity with water is another, a body of water. And one of the things I notice is that when you're in the midst of a sighting, and people tell me this, and I've had this, is that somehow time stands still. There's like a humming, which you also tend to encounter when you're about to see some kind of ghost apparition, some kind of manifestation. It accompanies a sighting of a UFO as well.
Laurie says, yep, they get more active, and she would know. Yep. You know her.
Yes.
And so it's a humming. That makes me think of vibration.
You
know, like
frequency and vibration.
A vibration just happening, and maybe that's what's opening the door to these things. I don't know.
I agree with you. And I think the more I look into this and piece together things, I mean, you have a very interesting question there that got me thinking, Chris, that maybe we're crossing dimensions here when we have these experiences. I mean, bodily, we're here, but I guess somewhere in our makeup,
consciousness,
we're looking past the veil, so to speak, and seeing things we're not supposed to see, or maybe they're allowing us to see it.
Right.
What didgeridoo?
Like a didgeridoo, yep.
Didgeridoo, yeah.
Yeah, and that's part of hers. Yeah, absolutely. And that's very interesting, you know, to hear that, and then the phenomena happens. I think sleep states have something to do with it. Most, or not, I don't want to say most, but a lot of the phenomena seems to happen when people are almost on a crest of sleep or just falling asleep. Hypnagogic.
Hypnagogic.
Yeah, I messed that word up. In that state where you're just like starting to fall asleep, something seems to happen. You know,
absolutely.
That's when a lot of this occurs. Also, when people are kind of in that autopilot state. And we talked to Terry Lovelace about alien abductions, who's been haunted by aliens his whole life. You know, an amazing story. But you know, he talked about some of the smaller things that happen to him. He might just be riding a bike, just kind of, you know, forgetting about what's going on, and
then he has time missing for 3 or 4 hours.
There's a huge time lapse, and 6 hours or more have gone by, and he wakes up in a ditch. I mean, it's fascinating.
It is.
And see, the thing is, like Terry, some of these people get tagged for some reason, like sometimes generational. You know, it could have started even before him in his family, but somehow he got tagged. So now it's like happening over the course of many seasons,
right?
Over the course of a lifetime. And the question is, why?
That's some of the theories on that is that they're changing DNA, or they're abducting, you know, or creating fetuses and that kind of thing, and trying to change the population, or seeing how, you know, somebody was abducted and perhaps impregnated even in their family, how the family tree descends and how things play out.
Mm-hmm.
Just a theory, though, like everything else. You know what I mean? Is so many things that we could,
Speaking of being impregnated, I had a case where this woman lives somewhere in the Midwest. That I can tell. It was a pretty sizable house, and she lived alone because the entire family was grown and gone. Husband had passed away. And here she was in the middle of the night reading a book. And the next thing she knew, at the open window, she walked over because there was a distinctive red orb. Now, she lives in an area where there's a field across the street from her. And there's not many houses. There's like maybe 5 acres of land allotted to this house. There was a field across the street, and then past the field is a huge area, a vast tract of woods. And then I think there was a lake, from what I recall, she told me. I'd have to go back to the book to see. But that's where this orb, red orb, originated from. And it was coming closer and closer as she stood by the open window. It was summertime. And she wondered what it was. She got a little scared, so she drew the curtains, went back to bed, and kept reading again, and then sensed that there was something coming. You know, kind of like that visceral feeling you have of growing apprehension. So she steps out of bed, walks over to the window, parts the curtains, and lo and behold, the orb is now over the field across the street.
Oh, man.
It is now very bright.
Mm-hmm.
She's now terrified. So she pulls the window shut, next window, pulls it shut, draws the curtains, runs back to bed like a child, and covers herself.
blankets over her head.
Yeah.
Blanket over.
Yeah.
She's out.
She's,
Snapping it.
you know, she's alone. You know, what are you going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she's lying there, trying to lie still, hoping nothing is going to happen. The next thing she knows, just like the movies, the blanket is coming off. She's got one lamp on, and then she opens her eyes, and there's something standing at the foot of the bed.
Oh my God.
Something.
Something.
Yeah.
What does it look like to her?
It looks like a praying mantis.
Really?
One of those. Oh my God.
Wow.
It extends praying mantises have the long, very thin,
Sure.
spindly arm.
Yes.
Yeah. So it extends one arm. It's got some kind of a rod, and it goes right into her navel.
Ugh.
Oh my
Right
God.
into her navel.
Did she scream?
Amber Young says, and nope.
Nope. And
She's
no.
not out of it. Nope.
Her throat is totally locked. It's like sleep paralysis. And then she faints, or she thinks she fainted.
Mm.
She woke up. And in the course of the evening, at some point before this thing got close to the window, she had tried to call her son, something's out there, yada, yada. But anyway, in the course of the evening, she was just lying there, and then she woke up. It was morning. So then she calls her son and says, something has happened to me. He takes her to the doctor. Okay, I'm on call again the following week around the same time. I see the thread and I immediately recognize the phone number. She wants to call again. So I pick up the phone, I follow up. She'd been to the doctor. They found out she had cancer.
Oh,
my
no.
goodness.
Was it removed from the alien or inserted by the alien?
Inserted.
She doesn't know. Her interpretation is that he gave her cancer.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Did
The
you-
other interpretation could be that it was trying to tell her that she had cancer.
Yeah,
to
right. Warn her. Yeah. A lot of times we put a smiley face on these things that I don't know if it always needs to be there. But
Yeah.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Our friend Steve says, I think the parallel is that our minds refuse to understand because we think in terms of logic. What doesn't fit in causes a physiological reaction.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Do you ever hear
that's-
screen memories?
Strained memories.
Screen memories.
Laurie says inserted. Maybe they gave her the cancer,
Yeah.
So many people, come back and say the majority of people that have been abducted by aliens say that it's a good experience and positive. And even sometimes they describe things that seem horrific, like a praying mantis standing over their bed, stabbing the pincer into their stomach or something like that. They said they would do it again, right? Which
Oh
is
my God.
fascinating. Why? What is the
Mhm.
thing? And a lot of them walk away with enhanced psychic like abilities, what Ray Hernandez calls like the contact modalities. And
Yes.
they are better at astral projection or telepathy, or they seem to pick up some kind of superpower from it, or enhance things they already have. I think that's fascinating. Did you encounter any of that in your MUFON investigations where people walked away and they had
I have
ability?
not. I wasn't with MUFON for that long. And then after that, I started traveling, and there was a lot of commonalities with people who felt somehow they were given either a gift or they were made more aware of things they were feeling viscerally to be true. In other words, it validated the idea that there was definitely something out there. Now, here's my interpretation. And you alluded to it, Chris, as being one of the choices. I think that we do have these latent capacities. And somehow these entities that are not in our dimension make us aware that we have the ability way past what we're capable of in the five senses.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it triggers it. The event that is so highly strange triggers in the person to awaken the other parts of their psyche.
Right, that was sitting there latently, like you mentioned.
Yes.
And part of them, they're
Mhm.
forgotten, whatever reason, have been conditioned by society to not use that part of their brain.
Mhm.
We often think about left brain, right brain, and the right brain is the psychic side controlling the left side. And the left brain is the logic. I mean, it opens that up or builds, takes down some sort of barrier between the two.
Right.
Well, like I think we all feel differently after having talked and experienced these things, which is why there's a division between those who believe and those who are already experiencers. Those who don't believe never had any kind of an encounter of that type.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
or seemingly. Like we were talking to a guy last week. It was Christopher Brown.
Yeah.
And his mother was like, they grew up in a haunted house, and they had the haunted childhood thing going on. And his mother was in denial of it. And it was almost generational. Like she just did not want to believe, like anything it could be happening. But the house was clearly outwardly haunted. So they, I think she just put up those blinders. And I think people have that
Exactly.
ability of like, they're just not going to see it. No matter what you do, no matter what the experience is that's going on around them.
No matter what they see. Yeah.
House is on fire. No, it's not.
Yep.
That's not probable.
Yep.
That kind of thing. And they just blot it out. Where if you're open or receptive, or you're the kind of human being that is receptive to these kind of things, and your brain is, and your soul, whatever it is receptive to the phenomena that's occurring. That phenomena will just walk right in that door, and maybe continue to.
Oh yeah. And I think that's why people get these screen memories, because they have to kind of explain logically what they went through. So they'll say, "Oh yeah, there was a bunch of deer out there." I had a case where this husband and wife thought they saw deer. They were standing on their hind legs upright, looking through the kitchen window.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Dear.
And then it started looking at them through their bedroom window. And the bedroom window was on the second floor. What kind of deer?
How big were those deer?
Oh my God, I would be freaked.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what was in my tea this morning?
Kind of mushroom.
What kind of mushrooms are in that salad?
Yeah.
What was that? I said to them. And they said, the only thing we can think of was that there were deer out there.
Wow.
They knew it was strange. They knew it was unusual. They never went back.
Yeah. Right?
They left, abandoned. It was an Airbnb. It was a farmhouse in a rural area of France, an Airbnb that they rented for an entire month. They abandoned it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
And they just went and rented in a hotel in town.
I
But
hope
they
that
kept
was one of the
insisting.
conditions
Yeah.
for a refund.
You wanna
if
start
deer show up
listing
on the
that.
second floor windows, you get full money back. Your Airbnb.
Right.
I'd want a refund.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
with the goddamn deer? You didn't put that in the ad. and
Just start listing that now.
speaking of paranormal experiences, that kind of brings us to your first book, which I know you've got a
Yes.
podcast that you're working on off of that. It's called Portals,
Mhm.
A Lifetime of Paranormal Experience. Can you tell us about that?
Please. Yeah.
Well, that's the amalgamation of that family. The first 24, it's kind of bizarre because I'm self-trained as a scriptwriter.
Mhm.
And you probably know I pitched to Hollywood for a number of years before I finally sat down and started writing a book. So it was kind of like totally different currency between writing a book and writing a script. The script is only 110 pages long, maybe. I mean, these days it's 122 hours. But you're writing a book, you got to really stretch it out. You know what I mean? People want to see a volume. So I started out by chronicling a story of an entire family that had all kinds of infestations. And then I decided I was going to include all the other accounts and went into accounts of people who were encountering UFOs, entities, and things of that nature. So this book is a representation, technically, of an entire lifetime, my lifetime, encountering people who had all these different accounts of all kinds imaginable.
All right. Fascinating.
So that's Portal. And what I did was I took, I guess I would call it a snapshot because they're only about 10, 15-minute segments. And I just started telling stories on a podcast. I just pick one story at a time to kind of like make it come alive.
Mm-hmm. So you're taking stories from your book, Portal, the Lifetime of Paranormal Experiences, and taking each one, like making a podcast out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Are they like on a weekly basis? Can people listen in?
Oh yeah, basically it's weekly. I tape on Tuesdays, and it comes. It's taped. It's on YouTube. It's on Spotify, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. I think there's Podchaser or something like that. Also in there. Sure. Yeah, so there's a few different ways to get
wherever you get podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
You can find it. And what is the title of it? Is it called Portal, or what is it called?
No, it's called the Sinister Archives, which is my page on Facebook.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
Usually I upload into the Sinister Archives, and it's called the Sinister Archives Podcast.
Gonna put it in the ticker.
And then I have a website, and that's the one you have, I believe, up there, Story Artisan, WordPress.com. And that's where I weekly put in excerpts of my upcoming book. So you get some, the last one I put in there, which is still in progress, is the Haunted Lithograph, which is a very interesting story. It's kind of like your Outer Limits, Twilight Zone kind of a ghost story.
Sure.
Nice.
Or Black Mirror.
Yeah.
There we go. Lower that up there. Sorry, I should have done it before the show. Oh, that is fascinating. And I love Twilight Zone and,
Outer Limits.
Outer Limits. I loved Outer Limits growing up.
Um,
Not to date myself or anything. We'll just go with Black Mirror. The Netflix series.
Now, you have a YouTube channel under your own name, correct? As well? And two podcasts on it?
I don't know. To tell you the truth, I've never really checked YouTube. I'm told that it's in there.
You do. I looked it up, and you do. And both of your Spreaker podcasts are on there. There's two of them.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
So we subscribed. We're hoping everybody else will as
That's
well.
right. That's right. Get out there and subscribe.
Please.
Like, you'd be surprised how much these things make a difference.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of roles behind the scenes that everybody understands. So yeah, get out there, like, subscribe. Anna, and us too.
Yes, please.
We appreciate it. Now, what scares you, Anna? All these kind of experiences, all these
That's a
crazy
good
things.
question.
What scares the bejesus out of you?
I think the one that has gotten close to me as far as actually shaking me up is a haunting that happened way back when I was a small child. And I was told, I don't know if you recall the film, The Mothman Prophecies.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Richard Gere. That creature there looks very familiar to me. And I'll tell you why. In our neighborhood, the neighbor across the street used to live about 3 blocks away. And the father committed suicide because that creature visited on him for several months. Some people feel it's demonic. Some people feel it's a creature. Some think it's a thought form. I don't know. But for some reason, it does terrify me.
Like Chris was saying, like a tulpa.
Do you think he's a tulpa, an egregore, like a thought form type thing, or what do you think?
I actually think that it is demonic. And I'll tell you why. Because the woman that survived that haunting that went on for several months, she was followed into the house across the street from my childhood home. And what she told me was that when her mother approached the creature at the window, she had a cross in her hand. And when she put the cross against the window, the creature pulled up its wing and covered its face and then faded down towards the ground.
Wow. Oh, that's a good story. No kidding.
Yeah. Wow. And that is in Portal. It's in detail. When I read from it, I avoid that particular story for some reason.
It bothers you.
I've been
subconscious level.
Yes, because I think that somehow, I think I saw it myself, but I don't remember to this day. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like hidden on the back of my head.
Blocked it out. Yes.
Yeah, I blocked it out. But I think one of the things that made me think it was demonic was because of that particular account, that it responded to some type of holy symbol.
Yeah, that probably is very true.
That may be the case. Larry says, get out the salt.
Yep.
Yeah, I would be concerned. Yeah, that is something. I have that around my house, and it's interesting that it reacted to religious symbology. So is it
Yes.
the intent of that person holding the cross, or was it the symbol itself that maybe triggered it to hide its face? That is fascinating. This has been a great talk.
Yes,
We've had such a good time.
Yeah, we have.
I think it's a good time to.
I'm glad.
to-
I have too.
Good.
Excellent.
Glad. I think we could do a whole entire podcast. I said this earlier to Chris, just on your first book alone.
Oh, for sure. For
Like
sure.
we have 2 hours.
We didn't even get into the screenwriting. There's other things. Would you be willing to come back and
Yes,
talk some more
please.
with us?
Okay, I will.
We're going to rope you in. It's been great. There's a lot.
It's wonderful.
And honestly, I want to dig into some of your material and definitely come back with some more questions and curiosities
Yes.
about it, because I think it's fascinating. A new book is coming out soon.
Mhm.
The new book is called Haunted Heirlooms. 4 Antique Dealers Reveal Their Stories, and that'll be out, I think you said May?
Around May, probably late May.
All right. You can now get on Amazon The Way Through the Woods, which is a nonfiction novel based on a young girl's escape through the haunted Bavarian woods of Nazi Germany. And of course, the first book, Portal, A Lifetime of Paranormal Experiences, is out on Amazon. And you have a podcast out there right now, Sinister Archives, that is kind of based on some of these stories. So people should be looking for that wherever they find their podcasts. This has been great. Thank you so much, Anna.
So much again, Anna.
We've
Thank
had
you.
a great time talking to you, and we look forward to talking to you again.
Yes.
Thank you again. Have a
You're
good
very
night.
welcome. You too. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all the time we have for the Dark Horse Paranormal Podcast. Thank you for joining. Thank you, our audience. We love you guys.
Yes, we do.
Lori, Stephen, Greg Koss, Anne-Marie Young, everybody else that's been out there, Diane and Debbie and all you guys. We wouldn't have a show if nobody was watching it. So
Nope.
thank you.
Thank
And
you so
we'll
much.
see you on Saturday with Bigfoot and the Bunny. Thanks a lot. Have a great night, guys.